The rope was old frayed and dug deep into the branch of the cottonwood, creaking with each sway of the dying dog. The wind didn't help. It caught in the dog's fur and lifted his body slightly, like the air itself was too ashamed to let him fall all the way. Adam Yazzie stopped dead in the frost-dusted clearing, one boot mid-step, breath frozen halfway between chest and throat. His eyes locked on the figure hanging from the tree. Not a man. A dog big, black-coated, heavy with muscle, though most of it was wasting now. Hind legs barely grazed the ground, toes scraping at patches of frozen earth. His whole body trembled, and the sound he made wasn't a bark or a growl. It was a choked, wheezing rasp, the kind of sound that shouldn't come from something still breathing. Adam's instincts kicked in before thought could catch up. He moved fast, crossing the frozen clearing in long strides. When he reached the base of the tree, he looked up at the rope, then at the dog's eyes. Amber, clouded, wide with terror. They didn't plead. They just waited. Like he'd already decided whether someone would help him or not. A torn scrap of paper slapped against the dog's chest, duct-taped to a cracked leather collar. Adam ripped it off with shaking fingers. Name Shadow. Too dangerous. Can't control him. Sorry. His stomach turned. Not with rage. Not yet. First came the ache. The kind that lived deep in his ribs near the spot where old pain still settled when the night was too quiet. He clenched his jaw, shoved the paper into his coat pocket, and whispered low, "Easy, brother. I've got you." Climbing that tree wasn't easy, not with the frost and the stiffness in his joints. Adam hauled himself up the trunk like he had back in the mountains during patrol, knees biting, bark boots slipping. By the time he got high enough to reach the knot, his breath steamed in the cold, like smoke from a dying fire. He pulled the hunting knife from his belt fingers, raw with cold. The blade slid into the rope. It caught once tight, and for a moment he thought it wouldn't go. But then he pressed harder, heard the fibers snap, and the rope gave way. The dog dropped. Adam twisted and dropped after him, hitting the ground hard. The impact jarred his knees, but he rolled fast and gathered the dog into his arms before Shadow could start flailing. The weight of him was shocking, heavy with exhaustion. The dog's rib cage moved in small hitching jerks. "There you go, you're all right now." He wasn't. Not yet. But the words needed saying. Adam sat there in the frost, cradling the animal like a wounded soldier. Like Marcus after the IED. Like nothing and no one had ever needed saving more. The dog reeked of blood-fear piss and the long scent of cold nights. His fur was tangled and matted with burrs. A long, angry welt circled his neck, fresh and raw where the rope had bitten deep. Shadow didn't move. He just lay there, head pressed against Adam's chest, breath shallow. Something inside Adam trembled. Not his hands, those were steady trained. But deeper in the places no one saw. The parts he didn't speak about. The sky above them was pale and colorless, drained of warmth. The wind scraped through the trees, rustling dry branches and whispering like voices from another time. Adam stood slowly, lifting the dog in both arms. "You're coming home with me." The trail back was rough. Frost cracked under his boots and the weight in his arms grew heavier with each step. But Shadow didn't resist. He didn't even lift his head. Just stayed limp, trusting, or too far gone to care. The cabin came into view through a curtain of pine. Weather-beaten and silent, it stood like everything Adam owned, half forgotten, but still standing. The porch creaked as he stepped up, shoulder-bumping the door open. Inside, the air smelled like dust pine and stale coffee grounds. He laid Shadow down gently on an old woven blanket near the hearth. The dog didn't move. Adam crouched beside him, stripped off his gloves, and lit the fire. The kindling caught slow, but it burned steady. Only then did he breathe. He ran a hand down Shadow's side, gently watching for flinches. Every rib was countable. His paws were split from rough terrain. His ears, twitching now and then, tracked sound like a soldier waiting for danger, even in sleep. Adam wet a cloth, cleaned the worst of the filth. His hands shook now. The adrenaline had burned off. "You're safe now. Just breathe." And Shadow did. Not easily, not fully. But he took in air, let it go. One breath, then another. The fire crackled softly, warming the cold floorboards. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling loose shingles and brushing pine needles against the siding. Adam sat back on his heels, watching the dog breathe, listening to the slow rhythm of two damaged lives trying to sync up. He didn't believe in signs, not anymore. Not since the heat of Kandahar and the way Marcus's helmet rolled down that hill like it had some place to be. But this dog, this broken, silent creature, felt like something more than chance. Shadow blinked slow and uncertain. His gaze landed on Adam, stayed there. And in it, Adam saw something terrifying. Hope. Not blind trust, not obedience. Just the fragile, foolish belief that maybe, just maybe, this man wouldn't hurt him. Adam reached out, rested a hand on Shadow's coarse, dirt-caked fur. "We'll figure it out." The dog didn't move, but he didn't pull away either. The fire snapped loud, sending up a sudden gust of sparks. Adam didn't flinch. Not this time. The room was quiet, but not empty anymore. Shadow's breath hitched, then settled again. The cabin held still like it was listening. Outside, frost crept across the porch railings. In the distance, a crow called once. Adam looked at the collar again, then at the paper still crumpled in his pocket. Too dangerous. He snorted softly, bitter and tired. "I've been called worse." He laid his head on my ankle like he'd known all my nightmares. The fire had burned down to low coals, casting a soft orange breath across the wooden floor. Outside, the wind had calmed, but the cold still pressed against the windows, making the glass moan in its frame. Adam sat on the edge of the old couch, boots still on, coat half unbuttoned, watching the dog lying on the blanket, like a body washed ashore. Shadow hadn't moved in hours, save for the rise and fall of his chest. His breaths were still shallow, raspy, but they were steady now. A good sign, Adam figured. The rope mark around his neck was still angry and raw, but the bleeding had stopped. Adam had used what little antiseptic he found in the bathroom cabinet, and now gauze covered the worst of it, wrapped tight with a strip of torn flannel. He rubbed his eyes with one hand, leaned back against the wall, and exhaled. He should have slept. His body begged for it. Muscles ached, joints barked from the climb and the cold, but his mind wouldn't go quiet. The note. The word dangerous. The way the dog hadn't fought him, hadn't growled, hadn't done anything but breathe and let himself be held. Adam had known danger. He'd seen it in men with wired eyes and twitchy hands in the jittery pauses before the gunfire. He didn't see it here. Not in Shadow, not yet. The cabin creaked softly, the pine logs swelling against the last of the frost. Somewhere far off, a coyote called out once, long and low. Adam's eyes drifted closed, just for a second. But the second opened the door. The world shifted. There was dust in his throat and the sound of tires spinning in sand. He could hear Marcus yelling from behind the ridge, then nothing, just the high whine that always came after the blast. He turned in place, weapon raised, heart pounding so loud He couldn't hear anything else. His body jerked upright. Sweat had soaked through his shirt at the chest and back. He blinked against the cabin ceiling, breath coming fast and shallow. The fire was still burning. The room was still safe. But his body hadn't caught up to the truth yet. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands over his face. And then he felt it. A weight. Not heavy, but certain. Shadow had dragged himself across the floor, quiet as a breath. His legs still trembled with every movement, but he had moved anyway. Now his head rested against Adam's boot. His eyes, clouded and dull, blinked up once before closing again. Adam's throat tightened. He lowered a hand, slowly resting it on the dog's neck just below the bandage. Shadow didn't flinch. He let out a rattled exhale, the kind of sound that came after holding your breath too long. Adam stayed there like that, hunched and quiet, the weight of the world pressing in, but no longer crushing. They stayed like that until the sun began to rise, turning the frost outside silver. Adam stood slowly, careful not to disturb the dog. His knees cracked. The coffee pot hadn't worked in years, but he had instant grounds and an old kettle. As the water boiled, he watched Shadow from across the room. The dog's breathing had deepened a little. Still cautious, still uncertain, but there. Present. Adam poured coffee into a dented metal mug and stared out the window. Pines, rocks, snow. Nothing had changed. But everything felt different. The note burned in his pocket. Too dangerous. He didn't know who'd written it. But it hadn't been a stranger. That dog had belonged to someone who had given him a name, who'd once put a collar around his neck, who'd then tied a rope to a branch and walked away. Adam sipped the coffee. It was awful, but it was hot. Shadow stirred. Not much. A shift of the legs, a flinch maybe. But it was movement. Adam crossed the room, knelt down, and set a small bowl of water by his head. "You got a drink, brother. Won't get better otherwise." Shadow opened one eye, looked at him, not fully alert, but not afraid. He didn't move for the water, but he didn't turn away either. Adam dipped his fingers in the bowl and brought them to the dog's mouth. Shadow licked them, slow and cautious. Then again. Adam tried not to smile. "There you go." He helped him that way for a few minutes, bit by bit. Not enough, but more than nothing. By noon, the sun had warmed the window panes just enough to melt the frost in streaks. Adam had managed to coax half a can of chicken broth into the dog with a spoon and some soft words. Shadow kept it down. Progress. But there was something under the surface. Adam knew wounds. He knew injuries. He knew what pain looked like. But Shadow's pain wasn't just physical. It was in the way he flinched when the wind hit the door, in how he tensed when Adam stood too quickly. This was fear that came from knowing what people could do. Adam leaned back against the table, arms crossed. "You weren't dangerous," he said quietly. "You were just with someone who didn't know what to do with you." He knew that story, knew it too well. Outside, the wind was shifting. The fire popped behind him. He needed to get Shadow seen by someone who could really check him over. Antibiotics, maybe stitches. The vet in Dulce was too far for the dog in his condition. But in Chama, there was a woman, Elena Nez. He remembered her from when his neighbor's horse had gone lame. People said she had steady hands and a soft voice, like she talked to the animals, and they listened. Adam looked at Shadow. "You got more fight in you than most men I've known," he said. "Let's get you looked at right." Shadow shifted his head slightly. Adam took that as agreement. He found an old quilt, wrapped it around the dog, then stood and grabbed his truck keys. The cabin creaked behind him as he opened the door. Snow had started to fall again. He knelt beside Shadow, sliding his arms gently under the dog's body. "You're not going back to whatever hell you came from." The dog whimpered just once, then leaned into his chest. Adam carried him to the truck, whispering low as he walked. "We'll figure this out." This dog didn't just survive cruelty. He chose to keep living. The road into Chama curled like a ribbon through the pines, dusted white with new snow. Adam kept both hands on the wheel, his fingers stiff from the cold, even inside the truck. The old heater whined and puffed half-warm air, but he didn't complain. Shadow lay wrapped in the quilt on the passenger seat, head resting low between his front legs, chest rising in shallow, shaky pulls. Every few miles, Adam glanced over. Shadow's eyes weren't closed. They followed him sleepy but alert, as if the dog was still bracing for the next bad thing. "You're all right," Adam said mostly to himself. "We're just about there." He turned off the main road near the cottonwood-lined path that led to Dr. Elena Nez's clinic. The building sat quiet under a soft roof of snow, a small red-painted cabin turned veterinary office nestled between two frost-bitten cottonwoods. Adam eased the truck into the gravel lot and parked. The silence that followed was deep, not tense, just quiet. Adam got out slowly and walked around to the passenger door. When he opened it, Shadow lifted his head just enough to look up at him. No bark, no snarl, just that same exhausted awareness, like he was constantly waiting for the world to drop him again. Adam spoke low. "Let's get you seen by someone who knows what she's doing." He gathered the quilt around Shadow and lifted him into his arms. The dog didn't fight it, didn't even flinch. He just let himself be carried like a bundle of trembling bones. Inside the clinic was warm and smelled of cedar iodine and hay. Shelves lined the walls cluttered with old farm manuals, vet supplies, and a few photos of horses and kids smiling in sunburned fields. A soft bell jingled above the door as Adam stepped in. Behind the front desk, a woman stood from a stool. Tall, late 50s with silver hair pulled back in a loose braid and sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She wore jeans, a flannel over a denim shirt, and the kind of expression that had seen too many long nights and still showed up anyway. Her eyes fell on Shadow and softened immediately. "Put him here," she said, nodding to the padded table in the corner. Adam moved without a word, placing the bundle down as carefully as he could. The woman approached her boots, barely making a sound on the wood. "Elena Nez," she said, not asking for his name yet. "You're the one from up the road near Red Mesa, aren't you? I remember your dad." Adam nodded. "Adam Yazzie." She smiled faintly. "Thought so. You look like him. He brought me a calf with frostbite about 10 winters ago." She turned her attention to the dog. Her hands weathered but sure moved gently over Shadow's body, checking limbs, lifting paws, pressing along his ribs. She said nothing for the first few minutes. Adam watched her carefully, standing a few feet back, arms crossed, but not tight. Something about the way she moved made it easier to breathe. Elena lifted the edge of the quilt, revealing the wound around Shadow's neck. Her fingers stilled. Her jaw set. "This wasn't an accident," she said, voice low. Adam said nothing. "He survived a hanging," she continued. "But that's not all. These welts here, see them," she parted the fur gently. "Old scars, belt maybe, stick, and this cracked tooth on the right side. That's from blunt force trauma. Someone used to beat him." Shadow didn't whine or growl. He just looked past her eyes, half-lidded. Elena placed a stethoscope to his chest. listened for a long moment, then pulled it away and let out a breath that wasn't quite grief, but something near it. But his heart, she said, shaking her head. It's strong. This dog wants to live. Adam's voice came out rough. He didn't fight me. Not once. That's because he's already fought everything else. Elena stepped back and pulled off her gloves. He needs antibiotics. Rest. Maybe some stitches, but I think the skin will close clean with care. I'll give you what you need. And pain meds. You've done good so far. Adam nodded once, but something in him stirred. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't have to, she replied. You're showing up. That counts for something. The bell above the door jingled again. A girl stepped in, maybe 10, with long, pale braids and a wool coat too big for her. She held a rabbit in the plastic carrier and moved with the careful urgency of someone who's been told to be brave. Her mother followed, mid-30s, tired eyes, a sweatshirt stained at the cuffs. She froze the moment she saw the dog on the table. That's the one, she whispered, gripping her daughter's shoulder. That's the dog they found hanging. Elena's posture didn't change. He's safe now. The mother didn't move, but the girl did. She stepped forward, rabbit still clutched against her chest. Can I pet him, Sophie? The woman said sharply. No. Sophie didn't look back. She walked slowly to the table, set her rabbit down, and reached out her hand. Adam watched, body tense, but Shadow only blinked. When the girl's fingers touched his muzzle, he lowered his head into her palm. The room held still. Sophie smiled, quiet and sure. He's not mean, she whispered. He's hurting. Elena glanced at Adam. He swallowed. The words came out soft, like stepping into sunlight after a long time in the dark. He didn't give up. Elena nodded, folding her arms. And neither should we. Sophie stood there a while longer, petting the dog gently, until her mother finally softened and joined her. When they left, Elena handed Adam a brown paper bag with supplies and instructions scribbled in firm handwriting. You ever need help, she said, you come back. He's got a long road, but he can walk it. Adam adjusted the quilt around Shadow as he prepared to carry him again. I'll do what I can, he said. Elena looked him in the eye. Sometimes that's more than enough. Shadow stirred in his arms. Not a struggle, just a shift of weight. His head rested against Adam's shoulder. As they stepped back into the cold snowflakes drifting lazy from the gray sky, a boy across the street paused to watch. Lean hoodie pulled tight headphones around his neck. His eyes tracked the dog, something unreadable flickering across his face. He turned and walked off toward the edge of the park. Adam didn't recognize him yet, but the dog did. Shadow's ears twitched once, then settled. He didn't talk much, but Shadow didn't need him to. The boy showed up the next morning not with a knock, but with the sound of boots scuffing the frozen dirt just outside the cabin. Adam had been chopping wood, splitting narrow pine logs along the side wall, while Shadow dozed by the fireplace. The sound made him pause mid-swing. He leaned around the corner and saw a slim figure standing near the porch, hands shoved deep into the pockets of a worn hoodie. The boy had thick, dark hair buzzed uneven on the sides, and sharp eyes that darted everywhere but toward Adam. Sage Tenorio, the boy muttered like a name he didn't want to say out loud. Adam wiped sweat from his brow and let the axe lean against the splitting stump. You here for the dog? He asked. The boy shrugged. Elena said you needed help. Adam looked him over. 16, maybe 17. Shoulders slumped but not weak, Hoodie sleeves stretched at the wrists. He'd seen that stance before, in kids standing outside courtrooms, outside group homes, outside places they were expected to be, but didn't belong. Adam nodded once and jerked his thumb toward the porch. "Well, you're here. Come in then." Sage hesitated. His jaw worked like he was chewing on the idea of turning around, but he didn't. He stepped up the wooden stairs with quick, quiet movements and followed Adam into the cabin. Inside, the fire glowed low. Shadow stirred on the blanket, lifting his head just enough to see who'd entered. His eyes tracked the boy. No bark, no growl, just stillness. Sage stopped a few feet inside the door. His eyes dropped to the floor. Adam kept his voice level. "He's still weak. Don't crowd him." "I know," Sage mumbled. He set his backpack down and crouched not close but not far. Shadow watched him but didn't move. The air between them held something fragile. "Can I?" Sage reached a hand out, slow. Adam didn't answer. Shadow did. The dog's head tilted slightly. Then he eased forward just enough to touch his nose to the edge of the boy's fingertips. Sage froze. His eyes went wide, not scared, just surprised. Shadow licked once, tentative. Sage pulled back slowly, like the gesture had startled something loose in him. "I thought he'd be bigger," he muttered. Adam let a breath out through his nose. He was before they starved him. Sage's jaw tightened, and for a second he didn't look like a boy at all. He looked like someone who'd seen too much, too young. Elena said he saved a kid. That true, Adam nodded, pushed him out of the road, took a hit instead. Sage nodded once, absorbing that, then sat cross-legged on the floor, staying quiet. The rest of the morning passed slow and mostly silent. Adam offered the boy coffee, which he refused, then toast, which he took, and ate in small mechanical bites. They didn't talk about why Sage was there. Didn't mention the probation officer. Didn't talk about the fight he'd had at school that landed him in community service. It was enough that he showed up, that he stayed. Shadow, for his part, accepted the boy's presence without issue. He watched him move around the room, followed him with those amber eyes, but never tensed. He even allowed Sage to brush some of the dirt from his fur, the boy using slow, awkward strokes with a soft, bristled hand broom Adam handed him. "He doesn't flinch," Sage said after a while. Adam looked over from where he was pouring water into a kettle. "Not with you anyway," he said. Sage didn't answer, but he kept brushing. Later that afternoon, while Adam worked on patching the side window Ray Lopez had broken with a rock 2 winters ago, he glanced through the open door and saw something that made him pause. Sage had laid on his stomach beside Shadow, a paperback book open in front of him. He wasn't reading out loud, just flipping pages and occasionally muttering to himself. Shadow's head rested on the edge of the quilt, ears perked slightly. Every now and then his tail gave a slow, single thump. Adam smiled before he knew he was doing it. "You know," he said, stepping back inside, "for someone who didn't want to be here, you're not in a hurry to leave." Sage didn't look up. "He's quiet. Doesn't ask me questions." "That right," the boy nodded. "People always want you to say stuff. Like saying it makes it easier." Adam sat down in the old rocking chair near the hearth. His knees cracked as he settled in. "Sometimes it makes it worse." Sage looked up for the first time in a while. "That why you live out here?" Adam met his eyes and didn't look away. "That's part of it." There was no challenge in the boy's face, just curiosity, understanding. He looked back down at the book and turned another page. That evening, Sage helped Adam lift Shadow outside to do his business. The dog moved slow, still stiff, but he made it a few yards into the tree line and back without stumbling. Sage watched every step like it was a test. When Shadow finally lay down again, Sage whispered, "You're tougher than you look." Adam, standing behind him, heard it, but didn't speak. The sun was low by the time Sage packed up to leave. "You walking home, bus comes down near the store." "I'm good." Adam opened the door and let the boy pass. The cold was coming in strong again. Sage turned back just once. "You want me to come back tomorrow?" "If you want to," Adam said. The boy nodded like it was a deal. Then he was gone, hoodie pulled tight, hands in pockets, his breath trailing white behind him. Adam stood in the doorway for a while, watching the dark come in. Inside, Shadow had curled up again, his tail twitching in sleep. Adam didn't light the lamp. He just sat in the chair, let the firelight stretch across the walls. There was still something heavy in him, something that hadn't lifted in years. But for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like he was carrying it alone. Shadow snored once, low and soft. Adam let the sound settle in his chest, like warmth. Outside, wind rustled the trees. Snow was coming. The valley was quiet. But the cabin no longer felt like a place people left. It was becoming a place where people stayed. Property or not, you don't leave things you love hanging from a tree. It started with a voice in the grocery store, low bitter slicing through the narrow aisle like a knife edge. Guess he didn't hang long enough. Adam had his hand on a can of Coffee Heart suddenly grinding behind his ribs. He turned slowly, already knowing who he'd see. Ray Lopez stood beside the end cap of dusty cereal boxes, arms crossed, boots wide like he was trying to claim the whole space. His coat was unzipped, revealing a belt buckle big as a badge and a face just as sharp. His left eye squinted from an old injury, and the other stared straight at Adam with a flicker of something mean. Adam said nothing. Ray smirked. "Didn't think I'd find you playing nursemaid. Thought you were still out in the woods talking to ghosts." Adam turned back toward the shelf, dropped the can of coffee into his basket. "Not your business." Ray took a step closer. "That dog was mine. You abandoned him." Adam's voice came out calm, but his fingers gripped the wire handle tight enough to blanch the knuckles. "Tied him up like trash." Ray leaned in the smell of stale smoke and cheap liquor riding his breath. "He bit me. Twice. First time I let it go. Second time, no. You don't keep a dog like that. You put it down." Adam looked him dead in the eye. "You put him up in a tree." Ray grinned like he'd won something. He was dangerous. Adam took a slow step forward. "You're dangerous." The space between them went quiet. Then the store manager called from the front. "Hey, Ray. Keep it decent." Ray lifted both hands in mock surrender. Just saying hello to an old friend. He backed away with that same half-smile muttering under his breath. "Don't get too attached. I'll be back for him." Adam waited until Ray was gone before letting the breath out of his lungs. The clerk, a boy in his 20s, pretended not to have heard anything. Adam paid, walked out into the bright slap of cold sunlight, and loaded the bags into his truck with a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in months. By the time he got back to the cabin, Sage was already on the porch, brushing snow off his boots. Shadow sat beside him, head low, tail sweeping slowly in the rhythm of calm. Adam tried to shake off the tension before stepping out of the truck. Sage glanced up. "Everything okay?" Adam paused. "Ran into someone." The boy tilted his head. "Guy named Ray Lopez." Sage's face darkened. "The one who left Shadow to die." Adam nodded once. He say anything, said the dog was his, that he'd come back for him. Sage's jaw tightened. He looked down at Shadow rubbed behind one ear. He doesn't get to. Inside the cabin felt warmer than usual, but not because of the fire. Shadow curled near the hearth like always watching Adam's every move with quiet eyes, the kind of eyes that remembered things without needing to be told. Adam stood by the window sipping bad coffee from a metal mug, staring out at the trail that led to the road. "You think he'll come?" Sage asked from the table, peeling the label off his water bottle. Adam didn't answer right away. He watched the pines sway in the wind, the way the snow collected along the roofline. His silence was enough. That night, the first mark came. Adam had gone to check the generator behind the cabin, and when he came back around, he saw it spray paint on the porch rail. "Keep the mutt." Sage saw it too. Coward. Adam grabbed a rag and scrubbed it off with snow and vinegar. The smell stayed longer than the words. The next morning, tire tracks appeared at the edge of the property. Too far to be casual. Too close to be coincidence. Elena came by that afternoon with more antibiotics. She took one look at Adam's face and asked, "What's wrong?" He told her about Ray, about the spray paint, the threat. She listened without interrupting, her fingers resting lightly on the dog's back. "I've known Ray a long time," she said. "Mean drunk, always one bad year away from breaking. He ever hit that dog in public?" Adam shook his head. "Then proving abuse will be hard, and if Shadow's still registered to him—" She didn't finish the sentence. Adam stood pacing. "He left him to die. That counts for something." "It should," she said. "But you know how it works." Adam rubbed his temple. Elena sighed. "Let me make a few calls, and keep the dog close." After she left, the cabin settled into a tense stillness. Adam didn't sleep that night. Sat on the couch with a shotgun across his lap while Shadow lay at his feet. Just after 3 a.m., tires crunched in the distance. Then silence. Sage showed up the next morning, eyes sharper than usual. "Windows cracked on the shed," he said. "Not broken, just moved." Adam followed him out. The latch was bent. The snow on the ground showed one pair of footprints. Big ones. He closed the door and slid the bolt. When they went back inside, Shadow followed them both like a shadow himself, never more than 2 steps away. That afternoon, Sage was feeding him when he asked, "Why do people do that?" Hurt things like him. Adam sat at the table running a whetstone over a dull blade. He didn't look up. Because they're scared of what they can't control. Sage swallowed. "You ever feel that way?" Adam paused. "Yeah. Did you ever?" Sage's shoulders relaxed. Adam kept sharpening. "But I've thought about walking away. More than once." "Why didn't you?" Adam looked at Shadow. "Because someone stayed for me. Once." The room stayed quiet for a while. Just before dusk, Sage walked to the mailbox at the edge of the road. When he came back, his face was pale. "You need to see this." He handed Adam a folded piece of paper. Handwritten. All capital letters. "You have something that isn't yours. Give him back." No name. Just the weight of it. Adam folded it once, tucked it into the drawer near the sink. He didn't speak. Just stood and walked to the fire where Shadow lay. He crouched, ran a hand along the dog's thick coat. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered. Shadow's tail moved once. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and soundless. Inside, the firelight flickered against the window, its reflection just bright enough to hide the shape watching from the trees. He didn't hesitate. He saw the truck, and he ran toward the boy. The wind had picked up by late morning, dragging cold across the streets of Chama like a warning. Adam pulled his coat tighter and glanced toward the soccer field behind the rec center. Sage jogged a few steps ahead, kicking a scuffed ball along the cracked asphalt with his usual quiet intensity. Shadow padded beside him, steady but slow, ears up, tail low. His stride still held the ghost of injury, but the strength in his legs had started to return. A group of kids played on the far side of the field, yelling and laughing. Adam recognized a few from the clinic. The girl Sophie waved when she saw Shadow, then shyly tucked behind her older brother. Sage gave a small nod, but kept moving, guiding the ball with practiced feet. Adam watched from the sidelines, one hand in his coat pocket, the other gripping a thermos of lukewarm coffee. The sun was out, but weak, stretching pale light across the frost-bitten grass. He scanned the edges of the park. Every truck that passed stirred his gut, but today felt calm. For the first time in a long while, it felt like Shadow belonged out in the world. Sage tapped the ball again, this time toward a younger boy, maybe 6 or 7, bundled in a red puffer coat. The boy missed the ball completely and laughed, running after it as it bounced down the small hill toward the street. Adam's chest tightened. Wait! The boy didn't stop. The ball rolled into the road, and the boy followed. From the opposite corner, tires screeched. Adam's breath caught. An old blue pickup whipped around the bend, rattling hard gravel, scattering beneath bald tires. The driver's hands jerked the wheel, but he was going too fast, too close. Adam shouted, "Kids, stop!" Everything slowed. The boy froze halfway across the road. The truck kept coming. Shadow moved. Without a sound, without warning, the black dog launched forward, powerful, fast, all tension and muscle. His legs stretched in long, practiced strides, scars forgotten, pain ignored. Adam didn't even have time to yell before Shadow struck the boy with his shoulder hard enough to knock him off balance and send him tumbling into the grass. The truck blew past with a howl, its tires narrowly missing Shadow's back legs. The driver braked too late, fishtailing down the block, the engine choking on gravel and guilt. Adam ran. The boy sat up first, crying but moving, scrapes on his palms. Shaky, but okay. Shadow stood between the tire tracks, chest heaving, tail, still eyes locked on the retreating truck like he was daring it to turn around. Adam dropped beside the boy, hands moving fast, checking limbs, looking into his tear-streaked face. "You okay?" he asked. The boy nodded, hiccuping. I think so." Adam looked over. Shadow limped toward them. Not badly, but stiff. His breath came in sharp bursts, white in the cold air. When he reached them, he didn't bark, didn't whine. He just rested his body beside the boy like a wall that wouldn't move again. Adam's throat tightened. He reached out his hand, resting firm on Shadow's back. The dog leaned into it. From the field, the mother came running, winded, frantic. She scooped the boy up in her arms and held him tight, rocking back and forth, murmuring apologies and gratitude in a voice cracking from fear. "That dog," she gasped. "He saved my son." Sage appeared a second later, panting, eyes wide. "Is he okay?" Adam nodded, rising slowly. "Yeah, thanks to Shadow." A crowd had started to gather, parents, kids, the clerk from the gas station. Whispered voices mixed with the wind. "Isn't that the one someone said? The one from the woods?" Another answered, "Yeah, it is." Adam stood next to Shadow, his hand still on the dog's shoulder. and for the first time no one stepped back. They stepped forward. Sophie came close, knelt, and reached out without asking. Shadow let her touch him. Her small hand rested on his muzzle, and he closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of being seen without fear was heavier than anything else he'd carried. Sage stood near Adam, watching everything with a frown that didn't quite match the pride in his posture. He didn't even think, the boy said. He just moved. "That's what real protectors do," Adam said. By the time they got back to the cabin, the sun had dropped low, and the wind carried the scent of snow again. Adam helped Shadow out of the truck, careful with the limp. Sage laid out the blanket near the fire, fluffing it like it might matter. Shadow eased down with a soft groan and placed his head on his paws. Adam opened a can of broth and poured it into a bowl. Set it down beside the dog. Shadow didn't move right away, just blinked at the fire. "You did good today," Adam said, his voice soft and sure. "Better than a lot of men would have." Sage sat down cross-legged nearby, still in his coat. He looked at the dog the way someone looks at a mountain after a long hike, tired, impressed, a little changed. "You think that mom's gonna tell people?" Adam nodded. "Yeah. Word gets around." Sage looked at the fire, his voice dropping. "That's good, right?" Adam hesitated. "It should be." The wind rattled the shutters again. Adam walked over and checked the window lock, then did the same to the door. He didn't say it, but they both felt it. Ray would hear about today, and he wouldn't like it. Shadow stirred, lifting his head just slightly. His eyes tracked Adam's every step like a soldier guarding his post. Adam leaned down, resting one hand on the dog's coarse fur. "You're not just a survivor," he murmured. "You're something more now." Shadow let out a breath, warm and even. That night, the wind howled harder, and snow drifted in heavy waves across the valley. Inside the cabin, firelight danced on the logs, softening the edges of every scar in the room, seen and unseen. Outside, tire tracks faded beneath the snow. Inside, the dog slept without flinching. "I thought I'd left the war." But that night it came back through the window. The storm hit harder than expected. By dusk, snow swept sideways across the valley, blanketing the pines and turning the world outside the cabin into a curtain of shifting white. Adam stood at the woodpile, his breath clouding thick in the air, stacking logs into his arms. Every few seconds he glanced up at the trees. Too quiet. Too still. Even the birds had gone silent. He hadn't told Sage, but something in his chest had been tight since the park, since the way people looked at Shadow afterward. Not with fear, with respect, admiration. And that was the kind of attention a man like Ray Lopez couldn't stand. Inside the cabin was warm. The fire snapped and cracked in the hearth. Shadow lay curled in his usual spot, head up, ears turning at every creak of wind. Sage sat at the table, sketching in an old notepad with a stub of pencil eyes flicking up every few moments like he was expecting something too. Adam dropped the logs near the hearth and knelt beside the dog. "You feel it too?" he asked quietly. Shadow didn't move, but his tail thudded once against the wood. Adam straightened, wiped his hands, and crossed to the front window. Snow blew hard against the glass. It was too thick to see more than a few yards past the porch, but that wasn't what made his stomach turn. It was the way the night felt, like a loaded rifle left too close to the fire. By 10 o'clock, Sage had fallen asleep on the couch, curled under the wool blanket, face turned toward the flames. Shadow was still by the fire, but now his eyes were wide open, tracking something Adam couldn't see. Adam stayed in the chair near the front door, shotgun leaning against his knee. He hadn't done this in years. Not since Kandahar. Not since that base with the walls that didn't hold anything back. He thought he'd buried the habit, the waiting, the listening. But tonight it rose like a bruise from bone. And then it came, a soft thud, not loud, not rushed, just deliberate. Adam stood slowly. Another knock. Flat. Dull. He crossed the floor and pulled the door open just enough to see. Ray Lopez stood on the porch snow in his beard coat open like he'd come in anger instead of preparation. His eyes were glassy, red-rimmed from whiskey, and something else, something rotten. "Evening, Yazzie," he rasped, breath fogging in the cold. Adam didn't move. "What do you want?" Ray wiped his nose with the back of a gloved hand. "My dog. He's not yours." "He's property," Ray snapped. "Mine. And I want him back." Adam stepped out onto the porch, letting the door click shut behind him. Snow crunched under his boots. The wind sliced between them. "You hung him," Adam said. "You left him to die. He's not yours anymore." Ray's jaw clenched. His shoulders swelled with rage that didn't know where to go. "You think you can decide that? You think one good deed makes that mutt a hero?" "I don't think," Adam said evenly. "I know." Ray's lip curled. "You don't want to fight with me, Cersei." Adam didn't flinch. Not tonight. Ray's hand twitched toward his coat pocket. Behind the door, Shadow barked. One sharp, guttural sound that cut through the storm like a warning shot. Ray stepped back. Just slightly. "You've got no right." Adam's voice dropped to something colder than the snow. "I've got every right." For a moment, Ray looked like he might charge him. Like all that broken fury would finally spill out. Instead, he spat in the snow and turned. "You'll be sorry," he muttered, staggering back toward his truck, which idled just beyond the trees, its headlights dull behind the storm. Adam stood on the porch until the engine disappeared down the road. Only then did he go back inside and lock the door. Shadow met him at the threshold, body tense, tail still. "It's okay," Adam said. "We're all right." The dog didn't relax until Adam settled into the chair again, and that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The glass shattered at 1:13 a.m. A rock smashed through the side window, scattering shards across the wooden floor. The crash was loud and sudden, waking Sage with a gasp. Shadow leapt up, barking deep and furious. Adam hit the ground in an instant, heart-pounding, throat tight. For a few seconds, he wasn't in the cabin anymore. He was back in the canyon. Smoke sand. Marcus falling. His breath caught ears ringing. Through the haze, he saw the outline of an arm reaching through the broken window frame. "Come here, Mutt." Ray's voice slurred from the dark. "Get out here," Shadow yelped as Ray grabbed his collar. Adam snapped forward. Instinct lit him up like a flare. "Stop." Ray pulled harder, and that's when Shadow moved. Not to bite, not to attack, but to step between Adam and the broken glass. His body blocked the path, tail stiff fur, raised a low growl vibrating from his chest. Ray froze, then slipped. His boot slid on the ice, and he fell hard off the porch into the snow with a thud that shook the deck. Across the field, lights flicked on in a dozen windows. Voices called out. A flashlight beam cut through the trees. Tomas, Adam called. "Over here." The old rancher emerged from the dark scarf whipping in the wind, boots crunching snow. He saw Ray on the ground and didn't ask questions. Just kept the light trained on him until the sheriff's truck pulled up behind him, red and blue lights flashing soft through the storm. Ray didn't struggle, didn't speak. He just sat in the snow, shaking his breath, coming in hoarse clouds. They charged him with trespassing, with attempted theft, with cruelty. The sheriff's deputy looked at Adam with a nod. "We'll take it from here." By the time the tail lights faded, the storm had calmed. Inside the cabin, Adam knelt beside Shadow and pulled him close. "You did good," he whispered, voice raw with something deeper than relief. "You don't have to fight. Just stay. That's enough." Shadow leaned into his chest, trembling, and outside the snow buried the tracks of everything that had come to take him away. The fire didn't talk, but it listened. The old hilltop clearing was silent, except for the wind passing through the tall pines, whispering like someone telling stories in the next room. A small fire burned at the center, low and steady, its orange glow throwing long shadows across the snowy ground. Adam sat cross-legged near the edge of the fire ring, his back straight, hands resting on his knees. Shadow lay at his side, stretched out on the cold, packed earth, unbothered by the chill. His fur twitched once when a log popped in the flames, but he didn't move otherwise. He just watched, ears tipped forward, eyes locked on the slow dance of firelight. Jonas Red Elk sat opposite them, his broad frame bundled in a dark wool coat, a beaded necklace disappearing into the folds of his collar. His face, carved deep with time and wind, was turned toward the sky. "Elena told me what happened," Jonas said, voice low, gravelly. "That dog stood between you and a man who meant harm." Adam gave a nod. He didn't even hesitate. "He's not just protecting you," Jonas said. "He's mirroring you." Adam didn't answer. He watched the fire, the way it held itself together even as it burned. Around the circle sat a few others, quiet figures wrapped in layers, mostly men, all with the same stillness about them. Some were veterans. Others just carried the look of people who'd been through things they didn't talk about anymore. The kind of men who didn't say much, but who listened hard when someone else found the words. Sage was there too, perched on a fallen log hood, pulled tight around his ears. His eyes never left the flames. Jonas leaned forward, feeding another log into the fire, with the reverence of a man tending to something sacred. "When I came back from my last deployment," he said slowly, "I couldn't sleep without the hum of generators. Couldn't breathe without checking the door 5 times. Couldn't be near my own wife without flinching when she touched my back." No one interrupted. The fire snapped quietly in the stillness. Jonas glanced across the flames at Adam. "You ever feel like you came home but didn't bring all your pieces with you?" Adam stared into the fire until the light blurred. "Every day." Jonas nodded. "We all do. And sometimes the ones who help us gather those pieces walk on 4 legs. Shadow shifted slightly, pressing his side against Adam's boot. "They don't fix it," Jonas added, "but they keep the broken parts from falling all the way through." For a long while, no one spoke. The fire cracked and settled. The wind moved around them like a second voice, ancient and patient. Sage pulled his hood down and looked at Adam. "He watches everything you do," the boy said. Adam turned toward him. Shadow Sage said, "He watches you like you're his reason for breathing." Adam looked down at the dog who was already watching him. The weight of that loyalty settled deep. Not heavy, just real. "He's helped you more than you realize," Jonas said gently. Adam gave a slow nod. "I know." The wind shifted again, bringing the smell of pine smoke and snow. Someone passed around a thermos of cedar tea. Hands moved quietly, no chatter, just the comfort of small actions done with purpose. Jonas added, "It's good to sit in circles again, with others who understand without needing everything explained." Adam looked around. A few heads bowed in agreement. Others just sat still, their silence its own kind of prayer. Sometimes Jonas said, "We think healing has to be loud, that it has to happen in a big moment or in front of a crowd." He gestured to the fire. But most of the time it's this. Quiet. Unwitnessed. Like smoke slipping into the sky. Sage stared into the flames. "He makes me feel calm," he said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. The boy's voice stayed low, uncertain. "Shadow. When he's near me, I don't think as loud." Adam felt something crack in his chest. Jonas didn't press the boy, just nodded. "Animals don't judge what they see," he said. "They don't label you by what you've done or what's been done to you. They just stay. And that's sometimes all a man needs to remember he's still worth saving." The fire burned lower. Wood collapsed into glowing coals. Adam looked at Jonas. "You said once someone stayed for you." "I did." "Who?" Jonas smiled faintly. "A mutt with half a tail and no patience. Slept under my porch for 3 months before I let him inside. What happened to him? He died in the spring. Quietly. No pain. I buried him by the fence. Haven't needed a porch light since." The wind picked up and tossed sparks into the air. They danced for a second, then vanished. After a while, the circle broke. People stood, nodded, clapped shoulders gently as they passed. No goodbyes. Just a kind of knowing. Sage waited for Adam at the trail's edge. Shadow walked between them as they made their way down the hill. "Do you think he knows?" Sage asked, glancing at the dog. "That he saved us?" Adam looked up at the moonlight brushing the snow-covered pines. "I think he knows we stayed." They reached the truck, quiet except for the engine warming. Adam helped Shadow into the back seat where the dog curled up and let out a soft sigh. On the drive home, Sage leaned his head against the window, eyes half closed. "I don't know what I'd be doing if you hadn't found him," he murmured. Adam didn't answer. He just kept his eyes on the road ahead, hands steady on the wheel. At the cabin, the fire was out, but the room held a trace of warmth. Adam restoked the flames while Shadow lay down without needing to be told. Sage climbed into the cot in the corner, curling up in the old quilt without a word. Adam stood for a moment watching both of them, boy and dog, before finally settling into the chair by the hearth. He didn't reach for a book, didn't turn on the radio. He just sat and listened. To the breath of the fire, to the rhythm of healing, to the sound of 3 beings learning how to stay. He hadn't spoken in weeks, but when his hand touched Shadow's fur, he exhaled. The clinic smelled like cedar and rubbing alcohol. The back room was quiet, lit only by a single overhead light and the gray daylight that filtered in through a frost-rimmed window. Snow had fallen again the night before, softening the streets, muting the town. Adam stood just inside the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, watching the figure seated on the padded bench. Luke Yazzie sat with his shoulders curled inward, his back hunched like he was holding too much weight in his chest. He looked young, 28, maybe 29, but the darkness under his eyes made him seem older. A Marine like Adam once was, honorably discharged, 3 tours, 2 near deaths, and then silence. Elena Nez had called Adam the day before. "He hasn't said a word since his cousin died," she'd said over the phone. "Won't talk. Won't meet anyone's eyes. But he showed up here yesterday. Just stood outside. I think he's trying." Adam had driven down that same afternoon, Shadow curled in the back seat, dozing in the sun. Now in the soft light of the exam room, Luke sat motionless. His fingers tapped against his knee, not rhythmic, not steady. just restless. Elena stood at the far end, leaning against the cabinet with her arms folded. She didn't say anything either. She knew when not to fill a room with words. Shadow lay beside Adam, his body still but alert. His ears twitched once. Adam nodded toward the bench. "Go ahead, boy." Shadow moved slowly with a grace that didn't come from obedience, but from something deeper recognition. He crossed the room, each paw silent against the tile floor, and sat in front of Luke. Not touching. Just waiting. Luke didn't react at first. His eyes stayed down his jaw tight. Then Shadow lowered himself into a sphinx position, head resting on his paws, facing Luke directly. His breathing stayed calm, tail motionless. 5 full minutes passed. Then Luke looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. He stared at Shadow like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. His fingers twitched. Then slowly, uncertainly, he reached out. His hand hovered above Shadow's head, shaking slightly. And then gently, he laid his hand on the thick black fur. Shadow didn't move, but Luke did. He exhaled. A deep, slow breath. Like air he hadn't allowed himself to release until that moment. It wasn't relief, it was surrender. Elena looked over at Adam. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes shimmered. Adam stepped forward, crouched beside the dog and the Marine. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly. "Not today. But just so you know, you're not alone in this." Luke didn't speak, but he didn't look away either. He kept his hand on Shadow's back, fingers tangled in the coarse fur, like he needed the feeling of something solid. After a while, Elena gave a small nod. "Let's leave him be." They stepped outside, letting the door close softly behind them. The hallway smelled like sage and wood smoke. Adam leaned against the wall, arms crossed, gaze drifting toward the old photographs hanging above the file cabinets. Images of rescued animals, handshakes, a smiling girl with a sheep wrapped in a towel. "He came back this morning," Elena said. Didn't say anything. Just stood in the snow, like he was hoping something would meet him halfway. Adam nodded slowly. "Shadow's good at that. He's better than most therapists I know." They stood in silence for a while. "He ever talked to you?" she asked. Adam considered. "Not with words. And that boy, Sage, he's different when Shadow's around. Calmer. Like he stops trying to defend himself from things that aren't attacking. That's what trauma does," she said. "It teaches you to flinch before the strike." Adam glanced back at the exam room door. "And what do you do when you've been flinching for years? You let something steady stand beside you until the fear gets tired." That evening, Adam, Shadow, and Sage returned to the cabin. The ride home was quiet snow dancing across the headlights. Sage didn't ask what happened at the clinic. He didn't need to. He just reached back once and rested his hand on Shadow's shoulder. The dog leaned into it. Back at the cabin, the fire was out. The room held the lingering warmth of wood smoke and something else, something quieter. Like a place that had been held in peace. Sage dropped his backpack by the door and went to the cot without a word. He was tired. Not just from the day, from the months before. Adam sat at the table, flipping open his old leather journal. The pages were worn thin, in places smeared with rain, pencil smudges, old dried coffee. He turned to a fresh page. February 4th, he saved another one today. Without trying. Just by being here. He doesn't know what he is to them. He doesn't even know what he is to me. But I'm starting to. He paused, stared at the words, then underlined the last sentence. Across the room, Shadow stretched out near the hearth, his head resting on his paws, his eyes heavy but not closed. Adam looked at him. "You're not just a survivor," he said softly. "You're the reason we're all still breathing." Shadow's tail moved once, slow and sure. Outside, the wind pushed gently against the windows. No threats tonight. Just the hum of a mountain settling into sleep. Adam rose, crossed to the fire, and stoked it until the flames grew tall again. Sage stirred in his sleep, pulling the quilt tighter around his shoulders. Shadow didn't move, but his eyes followed Adam's every step, calm and steady. And in that fire-lit room where no one had asked to be saved but somehow were being saved anyway, the quiet meant something more than silence. It meant presence. It meant peace. And it meant, for the first time in a long time, nobody in the room felt like a burden to carry. You're not the broken one anymore. You're the bridge. The morning sun melted the edge of the snow, where it clung to the roof, dripping in steady rhythm from the eaves. Down in the field behind the cabin, Sage walked the perimeter in slow loops, hands in his coat pockets, eyes on the treetops. Shadow padded beside him, alert but relaxed. Every now and then, the boy would speak in a low voice, not really a conversation, but not silence either. The kind of words someone says when they're trying to think their way out of themselves. Adam watched from the porch, coffee steaming in his hand, back pressed against the doorframe. There was a stillness in the air that didn't feel like waiting. It felt like something had settled. Not finished, but solid. He saw the moment it happened. A young couple pulled into the driveway in a dented white van. Out stepped a woman in a fleece coat and a man in a faded army hoodie looking hesitant. Their daughter, maybe 7, climbed out behind them. She had the look of someone who hadn't smiled in a while. Pale, withdrawn, carrying a stuffed rabbit so threadbare its ear barely hung on. The woman spoke first. "This is the place with the dog," Adam nodded once. "You heard about Shadow?" They all looked toward the field. The girl caught sight of the black dog and froze. Sage turned. Shadow turned with him. The girl's fingers tightened on the rabbit. She didn't move. The man knelt beside her. "You don't have to go close. Just look if you want." The girl didn't speak, but she didn't back up either. Shadow stood in place. No movement. No sound. Just stillness, like the woods behind him. Then very slowly, he took a step forward, then another. He stopped halfway between them, sat, waited. The girl blinked hard. Her hand dropped from her father's sleeve. Adam stepped down from the porch, walked to the girl's side, crouched low. "He won't rush you," he said gently. "He's had to learn patience just like you." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Is he safe?" Adam smiled soft. "He's safer than anyone I know." She took one step, then 2. Shadow stayed still, and when she was close enough to touch him, she didn't. Not yet. She just looked, and Shadow looked back. Then he lowered his head. Not in submission, but in invitation. The girl reached out, trembling, and touched the top of his head. Adam saw it. That moment. That invisible thread forming between the girl and the dog. A bridge. He stood and backed away slowly, letting her have the space. The girl crouched beside Shadow, now both hands in his fur, her forehead leaning gently against his shoulder. Her parents watched with tears in their eyes, holding each other's hands like they'd remembered what it meant to be a team. Later, after the van had gone and the snow began to fall again, Sage leaned on the porch railing beside Adam. "She hadn't spoken in months," Sage said. "Not since the car crash." Adam looked at him. Sage shrugged. "The mother told me. She used to talk all the time. After the accident, nothing. but she spoke today. 2 words, Sage said. She whispered, "He's listening." They stood in silence, watching Shadow curl into his usual spot near the fire through the cabin window. "You think that's what he is?" Sage asked. "A listener?" Adam took a long breath. "No. I think he's more than that." "What then?" Adam thought for a moment. "He's a keeper of stories, of pain, of things too big for us to carry alone." Sage nodded slowly. "Like you." Adam gave a small smile. "I'm still learning." That night, Tomas came by, his thick parka dusted with snow boots heavy on the porch. He brought firewood, some jerky wrapped in paper, and a bottle of strong tea that could strip paint. "You're doing something good here," Tomas said, eyeing the glow from inside the cabin. "I'm not doing much," Adam replied. "You're letting people come. That's more than most do." Adam didn't argue. He knew better. Inside, Sage had started sketching again. Not with the tight, sharp lines he used to draw when he was trying to keep the world at a distance. Now the lines curved, flowed, took the shape of trees and faces, and once a black dog standing at the edge of a cliff, staring at the rising sun. Adam didn't say anything about that one. Some things didn't need comment. He stoked the fire instead, and Shadow lifted his head slightly, just enough to watch him, then dropped it back down with a huff. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, but didn't touch the cabin. It felt like the mountain had pulled something in close and wrapped it tight in its arms. Later, when everyone was asleep, Adam opened the old journal again. He wrote February 18th. He doesn't just carry scars, he rewrites them, turns damage into meaning, turns pain into pause, turns silence into welcome. He's the bridge between fear and trust, between being lost and being found. And maybe that's what I've become too. Maybe I'm not just surviving anymore. Maybe I'm part of the crossing. He closed the book. Shadow stirred in his sleep, one paw twitching as if running in a dream. Adam leaned back in the chair and let the fire warm his face. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight they were safe. Not because danger had vanished, but because something stronger had taken root. A dog. A boy. A man. All of them broken once. Now somehow building something that looked like healing. They didn't come to save him. They came to be saved by him. The veterans started arriving just after sunrise, trucks and beat-up sedans bumping slowly along the gravel road that led up to the cabin. Some came alone, others with partners or caregivers. A few brought dogs, old ones, blind or limping with cloudy eyes and gentle dispositions. No one spoke much at first. The cold made the air brittle, and the weight they all carried left little room for chatter. Adam stood near the porch steps, hands in his pockets, watching them gather one by one. He'd cleared the snow off the walk earlier that morning, though it still clung to the fence rails and pine limbs like a reminder. Sage was inside making coffee and sorting through boxes of donated blankets. Shadow paced quietly around the gathering, checking each arrival with a careful sniff and a slow, knowing glance. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't bark or bounce or beg. He just saw them, and they let him. One man, Jorge, a Vietnam vet with tremors in both hands, lowered himself to a bench near the fire pit. Shadow approached, paused, and sat beside him. Jorge didn't move, but after a minute he reached out. His fingers barely touched Shadow's back, and then he let out a breath that shook like something inside him had just cracked open. Tomas arrived with a trailer full of folding chairs and firewood. Elena pulled up next in her battered SUV, stepping out with gloves on and sleeves rolled up. She moved like someone who'd been preparing for this for years. By mid-morning, the clearing behind the cabin looked like an impromptu field camp, circles of chairs, people wrapped in quilts or coats, fires burning low in 3 metal drums. Some sat alone, heads down. Others drifted into conversation slowly, like animals learning they could trust the water. Sage handed out mugs, weaving quietly between them all. No one made him speak. No one made him smile. But he did both anyway, here and there. A nod. A thank you. Even a quiet laugh when one of the old dogs tried to climb into his lap. Adam took it all in from the edge. Shadow stayed near him now, his body low, eyes calm but scanning. "You all right?" Elena asked, stepping up beside Adam and brushing snow off her shoulder. He nodded. "Feels like something big's about to happen. It already is." They stood together in silence, watching a man named Henry Air Force Gulf War slowly roll his wheelchair up beside a younger Marine with a shrapnel scar across his jaw. Neither spoke, but after a moment Henry reached out and set a hand on the Marine's boot. It wasn't a gesture of comfort, more like confirmation. "You're here. I see you." Shadow made a slow circuit of the yard, checking each fire, each face. At one point, he stopped beside a woman named Darlene who hadn't spoken since arriving. She was small, bundled tightly, her eyes dark and unreadable. Shadow simply sat next to her, his head turned slightly away. She didn't pet him, didn't even look down. But her shoulders dropped an inch, and that was enough. Later, Jonas came walking up from the North Trail wrapped in a red woven blanket, with a walking stick made of driftwood and leather bands. His arrival drew no attention, but Adam knew the power in his presence. He nodded once at Adam, then walked straight to the center of the clearing and stood still. No one asked for a speech, but when he started talking, everyone listened. "I won't pretend I know your story," he said, his voice low but firm. "But I know what it means to live through hell and still wake up, to come home and find the quiet louder than any battlefield." Heads nodded, eyes lifted. Some of you lost friends. Others lost pieces of yourself. Some came back whole in body but shattered in ways no doctor can see. He looked down at Shadow. "And some of you were saved by a creature who never asked for medals, who didn't care about your rank, your past, or your guilt." Silence blanketed the clearing. "But here's the thing," Jonas said, stepping closer to the fire. "This dog didn't heal by being rescued. He healed by being needed. And now so can you." Shadow walked to Jonas's side and sat down, the firelight catching the edge of the scar near his ribs. "You're not guests here," Jonas said. "You're not visitors. You're part of the circle now." The fire popped. Someone cleared their throat. No one moved to leave. Adam watched as the circle changed, not in shape, but in feeling. The air no longer held the tightness of strangers. It moved easier now, softer. As the day wore on, stories began to emerge. Some were spoken aloud, others told only through tears or in the way someone finally met another's eyes. One man took off his jacket and handed it to a woman who had only brought a thin hoodie. She accepted it without protest. At one point, Shadow lay down near a boy no older than 16, a foster kid brought by his group counselor. The boy didn't say a word for 3 hours. But when he stood to leave, he bent down and whispered something into Shadow's ear. The dog didn't move, just blinked slowly, as if to say, "I heard you." Sage sat on a log near the fire, sketchbook in his lap. This time he wasn't hiding his drawing. When Adam walked by, he saw it, a loose, soft rendering of the circle, the people, the dogs, the fire. And in the center, not as a symbol or statue, but simply standing there, was Shadow. Not posing, Not heroic, just steady, just present. The fire burned into dusk. No one asked what time it was. No one rushed. Eventually, Tomas stood and began passing around bowls of stew that had been warming all day in the iron pot over the biggest fire. People ate in grateful silence, the kind that fills more than the stomach. As the stars began to press through the night sky, Adam found himself standing again, where he had started at the porch steps, mug in hand, heart strangely light. Elena stepped up beside him once more. "You see it, don't you?" she said. Adam nodded, eyes on the flickering fire in the distance. "They didn't come to save him," he said quietly. "No, they came to be saved by him." Shadow lay near the flames, head on his paws, surrounded by quiet talk and the steady rhythm of healing. His eyes were half closed, body relaxed, at peace, and the people around him, scarred, weathered, hesitant, looked just a little more whole. Love didn't heal him. It was him. The snow had begun to thaw. It happened slowly, subtle signs that the long cold silence of winter was giving way. The trees hadn't budded yet, but the air held a different kind of weight, softer, less sharp. The creek that had frozen solid in December trickled again beneath the ice, a quiet pulse beneath the land. And with each passing day, the sun lingered a little longer on the mountainside. Adam sat on the porch steps with a piece of cedar in one hand and his old pocket knife in the other. He wasn't carving anything specific, just shaving the wood down slowly, letting the rhythm of the motion guide him. The cabin behind him was quiet. Sage had gone into town with Tomas to help deliver supplies to the shelter. Elena had stayed behind to rest. The last gathering had drawn more people than expected, and even now a few veterans were camped in the clearing below, helping repair fencing and clear brush in exchange for peace and coffee. Shadow lay nearby in the grass, front paws stretched out, eyes half-lidded, as if dreaming with his eyes open. He didn't twitch or stir like he used to, not as often. The tension that once lived in his spine had eased over the past few weeks, like a wire slowly uncoiling after years of being pulled tight. Adam watched him. There was gray at the edges of his muzzle now, a little stiffness in the joints when he got up. But his eyes, those deep dark eyes, had never been clearer. "You look like an old rancher," Adam murmured. Shadow didn't move, just blinked slowly. The porch boards creaked as Jonas stepped up beside Adam, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Figured you hadn't had your second cup," he said, handing one over. Adam accepted it. "Appreciate it." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that comes easy between men who know there's no need to fill the air, just to feel heard. "He's changed you," Jonas said finally, nodding toward the dog. Adam didn't answer right away. "I don't think it was change," he said quietly. "It was returning. Like I'd stepped away from something I didn't even know I'd lost." Jonas nodded. "That's what love does. It doesn't fix what's broken. It reminds you that you're more than what was broken." Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching, then slowly rose to his feet. He walked down the steps, across the path, and toward the trees, steady, purposeful. Adam watched him go. "You think he hears something?" Jonas asked. "I think he feels it." Adam stood, set the mug down, and followed. The woods were quiet, except for the occasional rustle of snow sliding off pine branches. Shadow led the way down a narrow trail that curved around a ridge, the same one they used to walk in the early days, when trust had to be earned by every shared breath. At the crest of the ridge, Shadow stopped. Below, the valley stretched out wide and open, scattered with birch trees, and the dark, broken line of the old fence that once marked Tomas's property. The mountains rose in the distance like weathered bones, their peaks dusted with light. Shadow sat. Adam stepped up beside him. "Is this where you want to be?" he asked, voice low. Shadow looked out over the land. He didn't move, didn't turn. But the wind caught in his fur, and for a moment Adam saw it all, the journey, the pain, the nights curled up together by the fire, the sound of Sage laughing again, the dozens of silent hands that had rested on Shadow's back in gratitude, the healing, the becoming. Shadow wasn't the thing that had been healed. He was the healing. Adam crouched beside him, resting a hand gently on his shoulder. "I get it," he whispered. "You were never meant to be mine to keep. You were meant to a path." Shadow leaned into the touch. No urgency, no goodbye, just presence. They stayed there a long time. By the time they walked back to the cabin, the sun had begun to set, casting long gold shadows through the trees. Elena sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't speak when they returned, just smiled. That evening, Sage sketched again, this time by the fire, his pencil gliding with quiet confidence. Adam didn't ask to see. He didn't need to. Shadow lay in the center of the room, belly to the floor, eyes watching each of them in turn, Sage, Elena, Adam. And when the boy reached down and rested a hand gently on his back, Shadow didn't move. But his tail thumped once, slow and steady. Later, as the fire dimmed and the quiet settled deep into the bones of the place, Adam opened the journal again. March 2nd, he came from pain, but he gave peace. He came from violence, but he gave stillness. He didn't just walk beside me, he became the part of me I thought was lost. He loved not like a man, but like something older, like the earth itself. Love didn't heal him, it was him, and now I carry it forward. The next morning, Shadow rose with the sun. He stretched slow and deliberate, then walked to the door and looked back once, waiting. Adam opened it. The light poured in, and the dog walked out into it, not toward the past, not toward the end, but toward something new. Because love doesn't stay where it was born. It goes where it's needed.